Farming and ranching is where all of your food comes from, and farming is broken. I visited with farm and ranch owner Kerry White in Bozeman, Montana about some of the changes over time that have broken farming and that could destroy your food security in the very near future. These are some of the very issues that you need to hear and understand before your food supply is gone for good.
Agriculture is really based on input and output. And your output costs, they really don't have a lot of control, like I said before, because you got to...
Almost no control over that.
Unless you got to get rid of it.
Unless you keep it all the way through and sell it yourself. And that's a
Farm to
very
table.
hard process to do, but you can do it, I guess. But
it's very difficult to try to market and do that. And a big input cost in agriculture is energy cost, fuel.
Right. Fuel and fertilizer, which is mined.
Yeah.
So one of the problems I see with what we're doing in this country, in World War II, we kind of made farming more important. And we did it in such a way that to produce abundance of food, which we have done.
Right.
And the cost of everything has been driven down. Now we're getting basically owned by these foreign companies. So they're actually taking the profits after the farmers do their thing. But also it's forcing these farmers to do practices that are so bad for the land. You know, we're talking about the water. I mean, yes, it's nice to be able to irrigate from a phone, but it's not healthy for the land or anybody downstream or anywhere else that would use that water underneath the ground. Same thing with fertilizer. We've taken all the livestock off the land, saying that's inefficient and bad for the environment, bad for climate. And put in monocrops that you can only really be profitable at with huge amounts of pesticide and fertilizers that are mined. So where you have the livestock that was actually a producer of fertilizer. Now we've concentrated all the livestock into a few areas to make these massive. I flew over a feedlot down in Kansas that was 170,000 head in one spot. Now what was intended to be natural fertilizer for the land is in one place. Now it's a problem, not a benefit, because now it's polluting everything that's there. So, I mean, this is kind of a...
Totally correct. When we moved away from the family farm to the corporate farming and trying to get some profitability, it was like I was saying earlier, farming and ranching is a love of the land. It's a love of doing it. Corporate has no love.
No, it's all because they usually have a board or something, and they're like, "Where's the profit?
Where's the profit?"
And if you can't show them that profit, it has to be quick. See, like right now, there's some things that need to be done, I think, to save the farming and ranching industries, but none of them are good quickly.
No.
Right? You have to think long term. How do we take care of our land in the long term? How do we produce food ethically and abundantly in the long term? None of those, nobody wants to mess with those because it messes with profit next year. We used to make things locally and regionally, and we used to sell them locally and regionally. And what that does is keep the money in your community, which turns over many, many times. What we're doing now is we're shipping our money directly away from all of our rural communities to a few major global corporations. What I do is make videos and live streams showing the real lives of people who live in between the cities, who care about their family values, and who sustain land and food security that we should all care about. If you care about those things as well, then make sure you join this community. It's time to stop hiding in the shadows and let people know what rural families do for their country. I'm Trinity Vandenaker. God bless. So go to lifeinthewest.com right now.
Well, and then I go back to the kids that go get a job and they don't budget, and boy, I better have a paycheck every week. So every Friday I'm going to get a paycheck. I know when I was in high school and I worked at the university up there, I got a check once a month. It was very difficult. You know, I was cleaning up the School of Architecture, sweeping the floors and stuff. And first week, no money. Second week, third week, fourth week, oh boy. But that's got to last me a month. Farming and ranching is one paycheck.
A year. per year. So you have to take that money and make it last. And I think because of how tight it is, these kids are watching their parents and they're seeing how difficult it is emotionally and hard on them as far as the, we've put so many pressures on ourselves in the United States. You have to have your kids in everything. We have to do these certain things to be counted as, we're doing okay. So we try to meet those balances and we stress ourselves out to the hilt. And then our kids are looking at that going, why would I ever want to do that job?
Why would I ever want to do that?
Yeah. And you totally forget the love of it.
Maybe that the average age of farmers and ranchers, it's in the 60s somewhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long ago, it was in the 50s,
Right.
50-year-old. Now the average is 60. How long are you going to do it? I mean, my brother just turned 68. I'm 70. My older brother's 73.
Yeah.
We're not farming and ranching. I think of my little brother out there when he's calving. Oh my God, if he gets hurt, what?
Yeah. Then what do you do?
But
right.
I got 3 kids. My older brother's got 1. I have one that's very interested.
Oh, that's good.
In getting into it. And so I'm just so thankful for that. Think of your equipment cost. By the time you get a combine and a header, $1 million.
Yeah, $1 million. We're not talking little costs here. These are unbelievable costs.
And fertilizer.
And fertilizer.
Just to put fertilizer on. And then your energy costs to run across, the ground. And that's why I don't blame these people for going to no-till.
No,
when I was growing up, we plowed and disked and drug a field. We let it lay for a year.
Right.
And then we summer followed it and then planted it, the next year. So it laid fallow. No, not anymore. You cannot afford in the ag industry to not produce anything unless you're taking a government subsidy of CRP.
Right. And so you have to push the land. What he's talking about is because the price you're getting is so little, you have to push the land too hard, and it won't sustain that for long term. It will sustain it short term. You can keep that rotation going, but you need something to replenish the land. And if you plow it up over and over and over again, what you're doing, if we're talking about carbon, you're releasing all the carbon back out of the soil. Whether you think that's, whether somebody thinks that's good or bad, doesn't matter. It's not holding anything in the ground. So we really need to bring back livestock on a lot of this ground that's farmed, like in western Kansas. A lot of that ground should have never been plowed up. It is horrible ground.
Stubble.
Yeah, or burn stubble.
You burn stubble to turn it into carbon.
Right.
To put that carbon back in the ground.
Back in the soil.
As a nutrient.
Yep.
Carbon is a nutrient.
Yeah.
So the Endangered Species Act, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the BLM, Tracy Stone Manning, Martha Williams, they did a new rule on that came out in the last couple months.
Has a lot of new rules been attached to the Endangered Species Act since it was passed, or is it just been abused because people are?
Well,
so just so you guys, before we get in those, the Endangered Species Act was created as a good thing to actually protect endangered species, like something that was going to go extinct. But that is not what it's used for anymore.
No.
It is used as a litigation tool to make money, for one thing.
Yes.
And then number 2, I think most of it's making money now.
Remove people from the land.
And to hurt rural America, yes. Yeah. To remove the rural Americans from the land.
Yeah.
So what you were saying?
Endangered species like the bull trout.
Right.
The grayling.
Right.
You can't
Grizzly
irrigate
bears.
anymore. You got to leave water in the river because the trout are dying.
Right.
Or the grayling are dying.
Or something.
What do you mean I can't irrigate?
Right.
Well, now I reduced my production or done away with my production if I can't irrigate. And so then they come in and they say, well, I'll tell you what, if you give us 20-25% of your water right, we'll allow you to irrigate and we'll mitigate your water right that you're using to make sure that we maintain stream flows and water temperatures so that the fish don't die. They're elevating wildlife above human population. So the new rule under the Endangered Species Act, they reinstated the prior language. In other words, if they do a under the National Environmental Policy Act, under NEPA, they are supposed to analyze impacts of agency actions. This new rule takes out any kind of economic impact analysis. So if their action had a negative economic impact on you or your operation or your industry, under this new rule, they don't have to consider the economic
So if
impact.
it takes all of ranchers out of business and all rural people out of business, that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The next thing it does is a designation of unoccupied critical habitat. So say that you have a grizzly bear that is residing in critical habitat. Well, what if they went over here and said, well, this is critical grizzly bear habitat? It would say, well, there's never been a grizzly bear here.
Mm-hmm. So they're saying
Doesn't need to be.
unoccupied, so that even if there isn't anything there, they can still say that's a...
It has a potential
I see.
of providing that habitat.
So this is what we mean by vague, too, because we're talking about terms like critical. You could say anything. You could say this yard was critical to something. I mean, it doesn't... somebody's got to define what critical means.
No, yeah.
So...
And the agency will define it, and the judges, prior to the Chevron decision, were required to consider what the agency designated as critical and go with what their definition was, because Congress didn't define it.
So they weren't like, judges didn't have to consider what they said. They had to take it with priority, right?
Yes.
Like, so what they said was priority over any rational sense scientific thing or anything.
They gave deference to the agency.
Gotcha.
Rather than
So I'm glad we
Congress.
got that off of there. But
protections for threatened is now the same as endangered. So if you
great.
have an endangered
Great.
species that says you got to get your cows off, or you can't grow grain here, or you can't do this here, now it doesn't even have to be an endangered species. They can just say, well, this species is threatened.
right.
So it's not formally endangered as designated, which you have to petition them to list it as endangered.
So
the agency can create the threat.
We can just say that's threatened.
It's threatened.
Because if you go through a zoo in Billings,
Yeah.
everything in there is endangered or threatened.
Yeah.
Threatened is a very good term you can use for just about anything. Because, I
yeah.
mean, what isn't threatened? Well, humans are threatened, for crying out loud. So we
Anything,
anything is
you
threatened.
do could be a threat.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, okay, so I got a fence out here, and I have I've got a good-looking gal and a good-looking guy, sandhill cranes, and they mate for life.
Right.
And they're out here, and they're dancing around, and they're just having, but they might get hit on that fence.
Right.
That fence has got to go.
So you can you can see how you could qualify this, especially when it's vague. It's not specific. This has been like something that I've dealt with in a long time. Is like, why is this so vague? But this makes perfect sense that if it's vague and their agency gets to basically dictate the law, if it's vague, then of course they're going to pass vague laws. They're not going to specify anything in there. They want to be able to tell the judge, this is what I think, and the judge has to go with what they said. So
Exactly.
that
Since
changed.
1984.
Since
for the last 40 years.
Wow.
And when that occurred, the environmentalists got their way because the agencies in a lot of cases were working for those people that get money, like the Clinton Foundation, environmental groups, Rockefeller, Hewlett-Packard, George Soros, Hans Wyss, foreign billionaire, have pumped billions of dollars into the environmental group. I have a list that I put on your seat of an article, greendecoys.com. You can check the funding sources. Check that out.
Okay.
It is amazing. Karen Bud Fallon Law Group out of Wyoming, she did an investigation on the money that was being paid through the Equal Access to Justice Act. The environmentalists sue, then they get paid for their legal fees and professional witnesses through the Equal Access to Justice Act. It was never intended for that. It was intended for veterans to be able to get benefits.
Right.
But the environmentalists turned it into a business model. And So our tax dollars, billions of dollars, are given through judges when they give deference to the agency for the environmental groups. They're being paid to shut down our timber, to shut down our grazing, to shut down our mineral development, our oil and gas and
Hunting.
energy sector. They're getting tax dollars.
Yeah, they're getting. So what he's talking about is any group under this equal
Access to justice.
equal access to justice can. Okay, let's say they use it for the wolves a lot. So they'll okay, we're going to delist the wolves. So they'll file a lawsuit against the government for not doing enough studies on some pine nut or something. And during this whole lawsuit process, the taxpayers, every taxpayer is actually paying the lawyer attorney fees for both sides. So a lot of times these groups are actually lawyers themselves. So they just all become lawyers. And then they all pay their own salaries through tax dollars by continuing to sue the government. And this isn't just a pie in the sky thing.
No.
I couldn't get somebody to go on record, but the guy that did the Forest Service, not the first. He oversees the budget for Forest Service timber harvest. He said 60% of their budget is taken up just in fighting that. 60%. So when you think the Forest Service is wasting money, their hands are tied most of the time. They literally can't do anything because they're being sued by somebody who's making money off of them, and that money comes from the taxpayers. That's what he's talking about.
Exactly. And now the Forest Service, you brought up that as a specific agency, when they consider a timber sale, first thing they do right out of the box is a risk assessment. They do a risk assessment of litigation on the project, because if they look at it and go, oh, we've got some ghost hawk in there.
Right.
We've got some wolverine in there. We better not even consider pushing this timber sale forward. And if they do push it forward, even though their risk assessment says the risk of litigation is low, the environmentalists sue anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And now you have timber, and like we talked about commodities, and you have to sell your wheat because it has a shelf life or whatever. Timber is a growing product.
Absolutely.
By the time that 5 years or 7 years of litigation gets done, what's the value?
Yeah, the timber usually is burned. So
burned or rotted or gone, fallen over.
So, and sometimes they try to log it after it's burned. So it's burned, it's good for 3 years and then it starts to rot. So if it's in litigation for 5 years, now you got a bunch of standing rotten stuff, nobody wants it.
It's mush.
It all falls over and creates an enormous mess in the more fuel.
Well, in the timber company, there's no profitability in it, so what are you going to do?
Right.
I'm not going to even bid on it.
They're going to get sued anyway.
Colorado lost all their infrastructure, and they had a big fire down there. I think it was the Basin Creek Fire, I think is what it was called down there. And so the Forest Service came in and said, we're going to salvage log this, and we're going to put this out for bid. They got one company in Texas to bid on it.
Wow.
And when they said, okay, we're going to give you the bid, Texas said, okay, give us a check. And he said, no, you bid on it. No, that's not you. That's not us paying you. That's you paying us to come cut it.
That's you paying us to come cut it. Yeah, we're not going to give you money to come cut it.
No.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, so...
You lose your infrastructure.
Yes.
We lost 2 more mills.
Yeah, 2 more. I know. I tried to get him to go on camera. I couldn't find anybody to go in. Everybody's afraid of this litigation society as well, I think. I think that's part of it.
They're afraid of retribution.
They're actually afraid of somebody on social media telling them they're bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's not even something that's actually going to do something to somebody. They're afraid of people getting mad at them and going on social media and saying, "Oh, you're a horrible person." They say that to me about me all the time. I could say whatever you want.
Oil companies donate to environmental groups so they'll leave them alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's extortion.
It absolutely is. It's and that's what I say, and I get in trouble for this sometimes, but it's absolutely true. A lot of this is not about the environmental group or the people. Maybe some of the people lower down in it probably do really believe in what they're doing. A lot of it just becomes a money-making organization. It isn't about It's not about whatever they're suing about. It's about making money off the tax dollars.
Yeah.
So, and when he's talking about, just to clarify something, he's saying they're doing a risk assessment for litigation. What that means is the Forest Service is going in, before they do anything else, they're asking their scientists and biologists and lawyers to say, what's the risk of getting sued here? What's the risk of, when we get sued, because we're going to get sued, of them winning? And that's really the risk assessment. So you have to spend an enormous amount of tax dollars on that before you can even put it out for bid. The amount of money that the taxpayers are putting into that process, and then letting their timber burn or just lay down and rot.
Yeah.
That could be logged off, that's dead anyway. You know?
And the other thing too, which really bothers me, is if you were to go in and do oil and gas development, say on state land or federal managed land, you put up a bond. If you were doing any kind of mining activity, coal or any kind of palladium or anything like that, you'd put up a bond, and it would be for reclamation. Mm-hmm. These environmentalists that sue and stop a timber sale, and the product is being devalued every day it sits there not being harvested when it should be, they post no bond. No bond on the devalue of the product.
So what, just for everybody, what's a bond?
A bond is security. So say that you go to jail and the judge says, okay, I'm going to let you out. And some of these states said no bond, you just get out, no bond.
Yeah.
But the judge says, I want to make sure you show up. You post a bond. So like say a mining company goes in and they're mining for silver or gold or some precious metal or something to make EV batteries or palladium or, cobalt or whatever, they would assess, when your operations plan is complete and you're done mining, because you have a finite resource, you're going to reclaim this back to its natural state. What's that going to cost? You need to put that up in a bond. Mm-hmm.
So they have to put that money first.
It aside.
Now, there's a lot of what you see in mining and everything that's so disastrous is long before we ever had any of the stuff we have now.
Right.
They just mined wherever they could, however they could. But that is not the process now. You have to put up the money first. They say, okay, this money right here is the money that would take to reclaim it. Reclaim it means make it look like it did before you were there. That's what it means.
But they hold up places like the Butte Pit, the Berkeley Pit, as an example of the destruction of mining. Mm-hmm. And I tell those people, we don't do that anymore.
No, we don't. That mine was
do
back
that in Asia.
Right. China does.
And China does.
So if you want that to be done to the earth where you can't see it, then you let them do it. You let them do it in Russia,
with no
in China,
environmental controls
they
whatsoever.
Just blow black smoke in the air, whatever. But you can't see it, so you feel better about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you can't see it. Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Something like that.
So these are just a few of the issues that greatly affect our farming and ranching communities and the families that work and live there. Make sure you go to lifeinthewest.com to get more episodes of this. See how you can help by purchasing products from the people who actually grow and make them locally, instead of supporting the global companies who are siphoning the money away from our local communities and out of our reach. Until next time, I'm Trinity Vandenaker. God bless.